Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Sasuke Retsuden, the Uchiha Descendants, and the Heavenly Stardust. Prologue. The man couldn't sleep. He sank his skinny body deeper into the cold sheets. He was indoors, but he could see his breath puff white clouds, and he couldn't stop shivering, no matter how tightly he wrapped himself in the threadbare blanket. He'd been sleeping on this thin, sweat and grime-stained futon for almost 2 weeks. Each day he woke with more bruises than the day before, which made him feel he hardly slept at all. Maybe he could have gotten some rest in a room where the wind didn't blow and whistle through the cracks in the walls. The man bitterly lifted his heavy eyelids and peered into the dark room. There were 4 grown men sleeping on the floor alongside each other. The room was small, with space for maybe 6 tatami mats, about 9 square meters. Seniority counted for a lot here, so as the newcomer, he'd been given the coldest spot to sleep in. He couldn't protest. Damn it, he groaned as he rolled over on the hard floor. How did I end up here? 2 weeks earlier, he was imprisoned in the capital city of the land of Ridaku. But even as a prisoner, he'd been granted the bare minimum of a life there. That prison was so comfortable he even considered committing another crime when his sentence was up just to get himself sent back. However, one day out of the blue, he got transferred. He was told only that he would be doing construction work in the north. With the work being physical labor, only young and healthy prisoners were being sent. In the end, he had been brought to a facility made of stone on the peak of a desolate mountain. The Tatar Observatory. The historic facility took its name from the legendary astronomer Jean-Marc Tatar, who had lived at the same time as the Sage of Six Paths supposedly. He was disinterested in any of that lore though. His concern was the location of the facility that he was in, a region so cold that temperatures remained below freezing even as spring approached. The prisoners were kept in an environment and condition worse than what stock animals had to endure in terms of food, room, and clothing. And they were forced to hack away at the cold earth from morning until night with hardly a break of any kind. Why do I have to? He gritted his chattering teeth and clutched the edge of his blanket. His dirty nails dug into the palms of his hands, and his skin had peeled away from the successive days of intense physical labor. His crime had been robbery and murder. One winter's day 3 years earlier, when he hadn't known where his next meal would come from, he forced his way into a house and stole everything he could sell. When he fled, he left the young couple who owned the house and their 2 children tied up inside. But no one had come along to free them, and the family froze to death 2 days later. 4 people dead because of him. He could hardly bear the thought. He had stolen from them only because he didn't have anything to eat, so in his mind his theft was an act of self-defense. He hadn't meant to kill anyone. Why did this have to happen to me? Dissatisfaction filled his heart, slowly but surely. He had had enough. Staring at the grain of the wooden ceiling planks, the man made his decision. Once day breaks, I'm getting out of here. The prisoners' lives were controlled by a gong. When the dull gong sounded at the crack of dawn, the exhausted prisoners would rise like zombies. If they overslept, the patrolling guards never hesitated to use their truncheons mercilessly, so the prisoners were always very quick to climb out of their futons. They filed out of their cells, wiping away the sleep in their eyes and scratching incessantly at arms covered in rashes. Meals were twice a day. Vegetables and barley boiled to within an inch of their live slop not even a pig would eat. Joining the line that snaked out of the dining hall, the man took a deep breath and tried to calm himself and the intense feelings that flooded him. His body was heavy with exhaustion, but his mind was sharp and excited. He could not be bothered by anything that morning, not the man who cut ahead of him in line and stepped on his foot, nor the man behind him clearing his throat of something so loud it felt like it would land in his ear. Today he would leave this place. He was breaking out. The man picked up his breakfast tray and looked out at the room crowded with prisoners. For his escape, there was someone he wanted to invite along. The shoddy room, a cafeteria in name only, was lined with rickety tables and chairs that were nothing more than chopped logs. The person he was looking for was sitting in his usual seat near the window. Prisoner number 487. Sasuke. More unusual than his name was his appearance. Unadulterated black hair and eyes. The chiseled fine lines of his face, a proud nose, and a profile that drew the eye. His features composed a perfect picture, not just from the front but from any angle whatsoever. When he saw him up close, the man wondered if they were really the same species. Though born with such looks, Sasuke was silent and unfriendly, always aloof like a cat, which only drew more attention to him. Even more annoying was his strength. So strong was he that no one could lay a hand on him. On Sasuke's first day at the facility, the old hands had been quick to harass the unusual newcomer. But seconds later, they were crawling along the ground with dislocated joints. As the men cried out in extreme pain, Sasuke had looked down on them. The warning that came from his mouth was quite simple: leave me alone. The majority of prisoners found Sasuke difficult to approach. The man himself should have felt the same way, but on that day when he made up his mind to escape, he found the ability to speak to the intimidating stranger. He sat down across from Sasuke and opened his mouth. The voice that had sounded clear and strong in his mind came out weak and timid. So, you're a shinobi too, right? Sasuke shifted his gaze from the window to the man. What do you want? Caught by those black eyes, his core trembled. I am too. From the land of wind. I didn't manage to graduate from the academy though, and my parents gave up on me. So I ended up drifting to this country. I can still need chakra though. See? Using his chakra, he drew the tip of a chopstick to him and made it wobble. He looked at Sasuke boldly, with a meaningfully arched eyebrow, but the black eyes had already lost interest and turned back to the window. So you're ignoring me? He stifled the urge to click his tongue and glared at Sasuke. He couldn't have been any great shinobi, seeing that he'd been taken prisoner in a remote country like this. As Sasuke stared out the window, he moved his chopsticks neatly from the bamboo shoots to the dish of fiddleheads on the flattened steel tray before him. He was an unfriendly man, but his manners revealed his good upbringing. He was quite obviously different from the human garbage that made up the prison population. Anyone could see it. Would you join up with me? The man said, after waiting for Sasuke to finish eating. He was nervous and stammered the question. What do you mean? Sasuke asked coolly. Escape, the man replied. We get out of here. You can control CH chakra, right? The two of us could climb the wall and escape. The observatory was surrounded by a wall of stone about 10 meters high. Looking up at it from the ground, it seemed impossibly huge, but it wasn't so tall as to be unclimbable, not if they used chakra. I've had enough of this place, the man continued. Why, you must be fed up too, right? Sasuke looked at him, no expression on his face. What do you know about me? I know that you're no ordinary man. Finally, he was able to say his piece without stammering. He couldn't figure out what a man like Sasuke could have done to end up in a place like this. Even so, he could hardly believe that the cool stranger was satisfied with these endless days of boring labor. You and me, we escape, he said again. Everyone's heading out to their morning jobs now, right? So we jump over the wall in the chaos of people coming and going. Give it up, Sasuke told him curtly. There's nothing but wasteland on the other side of that wall. It would take 2 days to walk to the nearest town. You'd just collapse on the road. We could pick wild vegetables, fruit, as much as we wanted. We could eat 1,000,000 times be better than the slop in here, the man persisted. And look, it's all foggy out. If we're going to give Minnow the slip, it's gotta be to dash. I warned you, Sasuke said, glanced out the window, and then stood up with his empty tray. The prisoners standing and chatting in the narrow aisle hurriedly stepped aside to make a path when they saw Sasuke coming. The man chased after him and grabbed Sasuke's arm. "Don't you want to get out of here?" Sasuke easily shook his hand off. "Sorry. I'm here because I want to be." The man was dumbfounded. "What? Here because he wants to be?" The man gaped as Sasuke left the cafeteria. He waited until the cool stranger was out of sight and then kicked at the table. "Making me look like a fool. Well, fine. You can rot in this hellhole. I'm going to be free." The man scarfed down the rest of his breakfast and stormed out into the hallway. He marched outside past prisoners talking with each other and looked up at the wall. There was still time before the day's work started. The likelihood of any sentries posted outside at this moment was infinitesimal. No one kept an eye on the wall. Unlike in prison, the guards here only watched over the prisoners at work. They scoffed at the idea that anyone could climb the 10-meter wall with 0 footholds. Too bad for them. "I can climb it." The man gently placed his palms on the smooth stone. Remembering the lessons he had in the past, he needed his chakra and concentrated it in his palms. He felt his skin suction to the surface of the stone, and the man began to crawl straight up the vertical wall like a frog. He could hear the prisoners making noise off in the distance. It had been only a couple minutes since he started to climb. There weren't too many people outside at this time of day. The director and the sentries were no doubt eating their breakfast in the main building. "You're fine. You can do this. You can climb it before they notice you. As long as Minnow doesn't show up." His body was much lighter than he'd imagined. He was already halfway to the top, but he wasn't tired at all. He felt like he could keep climbing for another hour. "Karen-ch." The man heard footsteps on the gravel below, and he looked down at the ground. His eyes fixed on a pair of yellow eyes, and suddenly all the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. Minnow had found him. Bad, bad, bad. I have to hurry. Panicking, the man lost control of his chakra. His suction hand slipped, and his body fell backwards into the air. He barely realized he was falling when he felt a fiery pain erupt in his side. His blood pressure plummeted. As his mind faded to darkness, he met Minnow's eyes once more and saw veins sunk deep into his stomach. Chapter 1. Teeth still plunged into the man's body, Minnow dropped to the ground lightly. He opened his mouth, and the body fell out. The man tried to crawl away, but Minnow stepped on him and violently flipped him over. He caught the man's shoulder blade with the sharp claws of his forelimbs and dragged him out to the courtyard. Here he stopped, opened his bright red mouth, and bit into the man's shoulder. "Aya!" the man shrieked and threw his head back. His flesh ripped open, and the blood gushed and mixed with the blood still pouring from his stomach, creating a bloody pool on the ground. Minnow could have ripped the man's head off or dug into his chest, giving him a swift death, but he instead turned the man once more and raked his claws down his back, pulling out threads of muscle. Face pressed into the dirt, the man wept wretchedly. Minnow took his time with the would-be escapee and deliberately dragged the man into the courtyard so that he in this moment would be in full view of the other prisoners. It was a show, a message to the rest of the prisoners that they would meet the same fate if they also tried to escape. Whoa, harsh. He's still alive. Poor guy. The prisoners frowned as they watched from a distance while they shouldered their pickaxes. Appearing to delight in shredding the man's flesh, Minnow at last began disembowelment. As the prisoners heard the slow dripping of wet guts and organs, the man's miserable cries finally fell silent. "Okay, that's enough rubbernecking. Get to your posts already." The workers flinched in sync when they heard this low voice from behind. A slender man in silver-rimmed glasses strolled out of a building. Zansel, director of the Tatar Observatory and the person ultimately in charge there, and Minnow's master. "If you don't hurry and get to work, I'll give you to Minnow for his dessert." Zansel's tone was casual but carried a note of intimidation that sent shivers down spines. The prisoners grew very pale. They quickly scattered to take up their posts, and mixed among them, Sasuke secretly took a long look at Minnow. Leaning forward to bury his face in the skinned stomach before him, Minnow waved his long tail back and forth for balance. The hard skin that covered his face was painted red, and his yellow eyes flashed brightly. A carnivorous jailer loyal only to Director Zansel, that was Minnow. The giant bipedal lizard had thick skin covered in keratin, teeth like steel wedges, and razor-sharp claws. He was about 2.5 feet when standing and walking, but, measured from the top of his head to the tip of his tail, he was more than 6.5 feet long. His legs grew straight down from his torso and were like powerful springs, allowing him to travel almost 100 feet in a single leap. The observatory was different from a prison. The sentries didn't keep watch over the prisoners every second of the day like jailers, and there were no locks on the cells or the front door of the building where the prisoners lived. There was no need for locks, and the reason was Minnow. Minnow was a threatening guardian who watched over the premises and mercilessly killed and ate any prisoner who broke the rules, and so the prisoners were very obedient. And almost no one came forward with thoughts of escaping. The work of the prisoners was mainly to dig. With hoes used for farm work, they hacked away at the frosted earth. When they came across a large stone or hard chunk of earth, they carefully dug it up and removed it from the ground. Rinse and repeat. Apparently, the digging was necessary to construct a foundation for a massive telescope, but the longtime prisoners said that they had been digging for nearly a year now with nothing in particular to show for it. "Ah, I'm freezing." Gigi stood his hoe up against his side and rubbed his hands together briskly. The cold was especially biting in the mornings, to the point where any snot running from noses would freeze up before having a chance to fall. "Sasuke, you're not cold?" he asked of the man working next to him. "I am," Sasuke replied honestly and rubbed the handle of his hoe with the palm of his hand, relishing the meager warmth generated by the friction. He was used to missions in cruel environments, but cold was cold. "Ah, it's too much. Why do they need an observatory in a place so freezing cold? The snow's long melted back in Nagar. I'm telling you, we keep this up and we'll freeze to death sooner or later. But if the alternative's getting ripped apart and eaten like that fellow this morning, it might actually be better to freeze to death in my sleep." Nose red, Gigi rambled on, no doubt tired of the monotonous work. He was also a prisoner at the Institute and shared a cell with Sasuke. He'd been arrested for stealing when he didn't have anything to eat and given a minimum sentence of 6 months. He was around the same age and build as Sasuke, so they had been assigned to the same work area and often ended up paired together. "Oh!" Gigi suddenly cried out as he rubbed the tips of his fingers together. "Crap, I busted a blister. Oh, but wait. That's actually lucky. Now I can go to the infirmary." "What's at the infirmary?" Sasuke asked. "You don't know? New lady doctor. I hear she's a real beauty and real nice to boot." Grinning, Gigi added, "Single too. No significant other." Sasuke cocked his head to one side. "How do you know she's single?" "Well, she's not wearing a ring, so." "A ring?" Sasuke stared uncomprehendingly. "Oh, right," Gigi said. "You're from another country. I forgot. It's the custom in the land of Ridaku, okay? When you get married, you exchange rings. A ring on the 4th finger of the left hand, that means you're married. And this lady doctor, she's got no ring. No, crap. Guards." Gigi cut himself off when he noticed the approaching sentries, repositioned his hands on his battered hoe, and pulled it along the ground, pretending to work diligently. The guards twirled their truncheons ostentatiously and glared at Gigi but didn't even meet Sasuke's eyes. They were afraid of him. As the patrol moved on, Gigi released his hoe, and the breath he'd been holding came out in a white cloud. "Ah, I'm tired. I'm cold. I just can't anymore. Sasuke agreed. He looked back with a sigh. The Tatar Observatory stood on the peak of a range of rocky mountains. Built at an altitude of 16,400 feet, it was a tightly guarded stone jail. And the Sage of Six Paths was said to have stayed there. To find a record of the sage's stay at the observatory, that was Sasuke's objective. In the Land of Fire, Naruto was suffering from an illness. And the only thing Sasuke could do to help him was to scrape together any records the Sage of Six Paths left in this land. He was frustrated that this was the one time when he couldn't do anything else for his friend. Naruto grew sicker every second Sasuke spent here. "What's wrong?" Gigi called out to him. "That's some look on your face." Beneath a mane of hair left to grow freely, the almond eyes of his cellmate were inscrutable to him. Sasuke was yanked out of his own thoughts. "Oh, it's nothing." "You sure? You looked real serious there." "I'm fine." Sasuke brushed him off and readjusted his grip on the hoe. Returning to his cell after supper, Sasuke had set a hand on the iron bars of his cell door and was welcomed with a discouraged cry. "Eh!" A small skinny man lay prostrate on the floor in the middle of the room. Penzilla, one of Sasuke's 3 cellmates. Gigi sat cross-legged in front of him, and a teacup and some dice lay between the 2 men. "Damn you, Gigi!" Penzilla cried. "Rolling doubles." "Sorry. I'll be taking those cigarettes, thank you." Gigi grinned and pulled the cigarettes on the floor toward him. They were playing CeeLo. Given that their confined lives lacked any entertainment, many prisoners were obsessed with games of chance. But Penzilla had been addicted to gambling in the outside world as well. And while he might have been fanatical about it, he wasn't actually very good at it, which led him to acquire some serious debts after a series of losses. He had gone on to commit one marriage fraud after another, targeting women of wealth and using their money to repay those debts until he was finally arrested. A minimum of 1 year in prison. "Oh, Sasuke. Come play CeeLo with us." Penzilla rattled the dice in the teacup when he noticed Sasuke. He had clearly still not learned his lesson. Sasuke shook his head. "I'm good. Come on." "You're no fun," Penzilla groaned and twisted his head around to a corner of the room. "Gano. You're playing, yeah? Quit with the drawing and get over here already." In a corner of the room, Sasuke's 3rd cellmate, Gano, crouched over like a bird with an egg, his back turned to Penzilla. "I can't now," he replied curtly. In his mid-60s, Gano was by far the oldest person in the prison. There was a bit of red paint smudged on the hanging skin at the nape of his neck. "You still doing that?" Penzilla asked. "You never get sick of it?" "Don't talk to me," Gano told him. "I'm at an important bit, almost finished." A month ago, when Gano went out to work, he returned suddenly with his pockets full of reddish-brown stones. "I found something good," he told his cellmates. He had then spent every free moment slamming those rocks together to smash them to pieces, regardless of how the work cut into the skin of his hands. When he had finally broken all the stones after a full 5 days, he started to peel away the skin on the soles of his feet. Then he had asked the group in charge of meals for a pot and a spot at the hearth. And over nearly 2 weeks, totaling 30 hours during his allotted breakfast hours, he boiled that peeled skin. More than one person questioned his sanity as they watched Gano wrap cloth around the bloody soles of his feet, but he seemed to be enjoying himself. Gano finally completed the thick broth made of his boiled skin and finished making the reddish-brown powder from smashing the rocks on. The day Sasuke arrived at the observatory, Gano had given a hurried hello to the newcomer and then began to mix his 2 ingredients together on Matsubusa vine leaf. Sasuke watched his cellmate's hands as the man immersed himself in work Sasuke didn't really understand. Then he gasped. When the thick liquid was mixed with the dark reddish-brown powder, it immediately became thicker and more viscous, taking on a glossy, rich mahogany color. Gano continued to work the mixture for a few more minutes, and soon he had a vivid carmine pigment, the shade of a red apricot blossom. From then on, Gano spent every evening painting the canvas of his toenails with pine needles. "You're gonna lose it all in the inspection next week, you know," Gigi told the man busy at work on nail art that didn't even look good on him, sounding exasperated. "That's why I have to hurry," Gano replied happily. "I'm almost at the baby toe." High treason, a minimum of 17 years. Gano's crime had been painting a portrait of a noble confronting the prime minister. His father had also been a painter, and he'd had a brush in his hand ever since he could remember, never given the choice not to pick one up. Gano was painting a picture in a week with paint that had taken him 2 weeks to make. Sasuke understood Gano's dedication and desire to finish this painting, even though he knew he'd have to erase it the following week. Games and goals were critical in this place. As a general rule, prisoners shared cells that were 6 tatami mats large. Putting that many adults in such a small space was bound to lead to clashes, and men regularly beat each other bloody or bullied one cellmate until they grew weak and died. The cell Sasuke was in, however, was relatively peaceful. None of the men in it were bosom buddies, but they didn't have any real conflicts. Gano was immersed in his artistic activities, while Gigi and Penzilla oscillated between hope and despair with every roll of the dice. Sasuke stared absently at the moon until it was time for lights out. This scene played out every night in their cell. At the end of each turn, Gigi and Penzilla would take turns cajoling Sasuke to join them. "Come on, Sasuke. You play too. We'll go easy on you at first." "No." Sasuke had just turned down yet another invitation when he heard a sound and turned his gaze toward the window. A shadow momentarily broke the stream of pale moonlight shining on the courtyard. The guards patrolling, no doubt. There was something that bothered Sasuke about the sentries here. And now, during their free time, was the perfect chance to investigate. "I changed my mind." He stood up and sat down again in front of Penzilla. "I'll play you." "Huh?" Penzilla stared at him. "For real?" "All right. I don't have any cigarettes. Can I bet this instead?" Sasuke put his hand in his pocket and pretended to pull something out, while he worked his chakra at his fingertips. Applying an earth-style jutsu, he raised the ratio of a specific element included in the soil to the maximum possible, arranged the atoms on the diagonal, and made it crystallize like that. A red stone rolled into his hand. An enormous ruby, about the size of a cherry. "Huh? A gem? Is it real?" "No way. It's gotta be glass." Penzilla and Gigi stared hard at the gem. Sasuke neither denied nor confirmed, but the jewel in the palm of his hand was indeed the real thing physically. Unfortunately, it was man-made. "I mean, getting a pretty glass bead, well..." Penzilla shrugged. "Can't put a match to it and breathe it in. No way to enjoy it." "Listen, you..." Gigi snapped. "You got no more cigarettes to bet with anyway. I took them all in the game before. Wager kitchen duty or something. I don't want cigarettes, and we don't need to change anyone's duty shift." Sasuke picked up the teacup. "Instead, do me one favor." "Favor?" Penzilla asked. "I'll tell you after." Sasuke set the teacup down on the tatami mat and grabbed 3 dice. Then he lifted his face and asked Penzilla, "What's the best roll?" "You don't even know the rules." Penzilla sighed. "Ones. All 3 dice say 1. Okay, then I'll roll that." Gigi and Penzilla looked at each other. Gano also stopped his work and turned his gaze towards Sasuke. Sasuke brought chakra up into the palm of his clenched hand, and when he tossed the dice, he sent with them a faint breeze, too slight to be noticed. Chuck. The wooden dice landed in the teacup. Penzilla gaped at the 3 dots there. Seriously? The 3 dice, of course, all displayed 1s, just as Sasuke had said they would. Gigi and Gano stared, stunned, while Sasuke stood up quietly. "I win, right?" he said. "That's some luck, saying you'll get ones and then actually rolling them." "It's gotta be a trick," Penzilla objected. Gigi patted his shoulder. "Give it up, man." Tricks were commonplace in the games among the prisoners. The unspoken rule in this place was no trick was a trick unless you caught the other man squarely in the act. "You promised to do me a favor, right, Penzilla?" Sasuke said. Penzilla sighed. "I'm not doing nothing too hard. Relax. It's a simple thing." Sasuke headed for the door. "I'm going for a walk. If the guards come around to check in, cover for me." Penzilla grinned at first, but when he realized Sasuke was serious, he lunged for the other man's legs. During their free time before lights out, they were allowed to do what they wanted provided they stayed in their cells. But even one step out of their cells, they were in violation of the rules. "I can't. No way!" Penzilla cried. "How am I supposed to cover for you when there's clearly one person too few in here?" "Puff up the futons," Sasuke suggested. "As if that'll fool them. The guards aren't 5 years old, you know." Penzilla squealed. Sasuke stepped into the hallway. "Sasuke." Gigi called through the bars. "You know what you're in for here? They find out you broke the rules, it's straight to the box for you. And your excuses will be useless up against Minnow. He'll devour you." "I'll be back soon," Sasuke replied evenly. "That's not the problem here," Penzilla groaned. There were 2 buildings on the observatory premises, east and west, with a courtyard separating them. The west side was the residential structure where the prisoners slept, a barracks that looked like it had been built in about 5 minutes with whatever twigs there were in the area. The east side was the main observatory building. Prisoners were not permitted inside, but Sasuke boldly walked right through the front door. When he set foot inside, he was welcomed by a plush rug. The main building was the complete opposite of the prisoners' residence. It was a magnificent brick structure like an imperial palace, a renovated building from the Tatar era. With 4 stories above ground, it was large for the standard in this country. Although the prisoners wept themselves to sleep on a hard stone floor, wrapped in threadbare blankets, the main building had plush rugs not just in every room, but even on the floors of the hallways and staircases. With walls sturdily constructed of bricks fixed in place with mortar, it was free of drafts, and the guards' rooms even boasted large fireplaces. It was an entirely different world from the residence, where icicles would form in the cells when it snowed. Sasuke walked down the hallways, hiding in rooms or plastering himself to the ceiling to avoid the guards who happened along. He didn't erase his aura in order to draw the large lizard, Minnow, to him. Although he couldn't interrogate an animal with words, he could likely gain some information from Minnow by using Jinjutsu to control him. Everything about Minnow reflexes, speed, strength far surpassed the abilities of any ordinary lizard. In all likelihood he was a summoned creature. Given that he was loyal to the director, there was a good chance that the summoner was Zansel. This country had never had ninja of its own, but Sasuke had been told the Prime Minister was collecting rogue shinobi for war. If Zansel was a shinobi and using a summoning technique to manifest Minnow, then the 2 of them would have been connected by chakra. But he had questions about the lengthy period of Minnow's summoning. He was always ambling around the observatory and watching over the prisoners, morning and night. This meant that Zansel was summoning the creature for a minimum of 20 hours a day. That was simply too long. Either the amount of chakra Zansel possessed was vast or the mechanism was fundamentally different from the summoning technique passed down in the land of fire. Tack. He heard the sound of claws on the floor ahead in the hallway. He stopped where he was, and his gaze met a pair of yellow eyes floating in space. Minnow oozed out of the darkness to reveal himself. "There you are." Sasuke raised his eyelids and concentrated his power in his eyes. Sharingan. The red eye with the 3 tomo caught Minnow's gaze. Instantly, Sasuke activated his ocular jutsu and pulled the lizard into the world of illusion. That was supposed to happen, anyway. Bang! Minnow kicked at the floor and came flying at Sasuke. The sharp claws, now bared, sliced at him and cut off a lock of his hair. The genjutsu didn't work. Sasuke dodged the charging lizard, but his back hit a wall and he was forced to stop. With the explosive power of a spring, Minnow closed the distance between them in an instant. Sasuke met the yellow eyes again, but the result was of course the same. The genjutsu didn't take. He slid beneath the charging Minnow, pushed up on his chest with a palm strike, and swung a leg out to sweep his feet out from under him. Sasuke heard the sound of the floor cracking as he lay face up beneath Minnow, and he decided to abandon any further attack. It was too dangerous to leave any traces of the fight and inadvertently put the director on guard. He'd come to the main building to do this because there were fewer prying eyes, but all his efforts would have been in vain if he smashed the building up. He pulled back, and as if to take advantage of the opening, Minnow opened his eyes wide. Waving his long tail like a whip, the beast came flying at Sasuke. When Sasuke took an easy step back to dodge it, Minnow came at him in a suicide charge. So fast. Sasuke manifested some ice with a general water-style technique to create an impromptu kunai and cut off the claws closing in on him, along with the toes they were attached to. Minnow kept coming at him without so much as flinching, and Sasuke sliced at his chest. "Arg!" Minnow cried and stumbled forward. A yellowish liquid dripped from the rough wound in its stomach. Not good. Sasuke immediately regretted his actions, but it was too late. Minnow staggered and then raced toward a small window used for lighting, smashed through the wall, and leaped down into the courtyard. The lizard then ran off as fast as possible, leaving a trail of the yellow liquid. Sasuke bit his lip and dropped his gaze to his hand, where the unpleasant sensation of the hit lingered. That final flash of kunai had gone in fairly deeply. He might have dealt the creature a fatal blow. However, the next morning, Sasuke looked down at the courtyard from his usual seat in the cafeteria and saw a familiar long tail waving back and forth down below. He opened his eyes wide in confusion. Ridiculous. There's no way. Perhaps feeling his gaze on him, Minnow looked back at Sasuke. But the lizard quickly turned his face away, as though he had no memory of the events of the previous evening. Minnow was alive. Sasuke was certain he had injured it pretty seriously, and yet there wasn't a mark on it. He couldn't understand what this meant. It was almost like he was the one the ocular jutsu had been used on. "So you were the one who dared lay a hand on Minnow, HM, number 487, a hostile voice said suddenly from behind. Zansol. Sasuke had been taking a wait-and-see approach to direct contact with the man, but if he knew about the attack on Minnow, then there was no point in waiting anymore. Sasuke had a few questions he'd like answered himself. He activated his Sharingan as he looked back at the director. Eyes. Red, the three tomo that floated up in his iris caught Zansol's gaze. Sasuke gasped, very slightly. He hadn't realized it until he looked at Zansol with the Sharingan. The eyes on the other side of Zansol's glasses were mere glass spheres. Glass eyes, he said slowly. How clever of you. Zansol narrowed his eyes, and the corners of his mouth turned up in a smile. I'm surprised you noticed. Not one of the men I work with every day has caught on. Zansol stretched out a hand and touched the window frame behind Sasuke. The gesture was very natural, and no one looking at him would think he couldn't see. No matter how many times Sasuke double-checked, Zansol's eyes remained unchanged. They were nothing more than glass spheres. It seems you can use some ninjutsu, HM? But remember this. As his false left eye spun around like it had its own mind, he brought his mouth towards Sasuke's ear and said in a whisper, "A mere shinobi can never take Minnow from me." End of Chapter 1. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.